All right. Hi, everybody. I'm going to ask you to take your seats, and we're gonna get started. We have a really exciting, fun, interesting panel that we prepared for. Thanks to some extra efforts. Today we're going to be talking about minting meaning. This is about art, identity, and community on chain. And before we get super deep into what exactly that means, I'd love to introduce here two major players, or representatives from two major players in the space. I'm Stone. I'm the, it says CryptoPunks, but I'm the ex-GM of CryptoPunks. And now I'm independent and working with amazing artists and creators. And this is why I'm really excited to talk to these two men here on the stage, because I know that they share those same values as I do. So why don't I start with an introduction? Ballon, you want to get started?
Yeah, commonly known as Ballon, but my real name is Matt. So just a life of juggling two identities. But my name is Matt. I work at OpenSea in business development, and my main focus is liaisoning with artists and creators. I've been a long-time collector in the space, and super excited to just kind of push culture forward through OpenSea, which is an amazing opportunity and platform where we can do a lot of good, hopefully.
Amazing. Han, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Excited to be here. I go by Bonafide Han online, and I'm the founder of Deca and Shape. And I've also been a longtime collector, and I actually got to know Balan in our Fidenza days. So those are good times.
And even though Han has an image of a DK, Sam Spratt, maybe a tiny little CryptoPunk in the corner, I'd like to note that we are all CryptoPunks holders, and kind of true to the theme, it's this intersection of creativity, personal identity, decentralized ownership that I think CryptoPunks embody. That's going to be the theme, and basically as we're evolving from physical spaces into these kind of online type galleries, what does that look like in terms for artists, creating artist communities and collectors? So we're going to get into it. First question, NFTs can be many things: gaming assets, PFPs, membership tokens, and of course, art. But we're going to talk about how meaning is meant to be on the blockchain. So can you tell me a bit about OpenSea and Shape's relationship first? Like, why are you both here? Why is this panel here?
Yeah, I'm happy to start. I think, starting with Shape and a couple other partnerships that come to mind, like Art Blocks as well, the real goal here is to align ourselves with people who are pushing culture and art forward. And so there's no better example than what Shape's doing. I think, being super artist forward and like really nurturing the culture. And so at OpenSea, we really want to be aligned with that and supporting that. And so that's why this partnership makes so much sense. I think it's a lot of great things have already happened, but even more excited for what else is in store. I think we're just scratching the surface.
Yeah, likewise. When I started in collecting NFTs, well, where did I collect them? It was actually a lot of the times on OpenSea. And so I started as a pretty avid user of OpenSea, and then when we got the chance to work together, I was actually really excited for this. OpenSea still remains the place where a lot of people go to discover and collect NFTs. It is the name in NFTs, and so I think we're going to do a lot of things together, and really excited for it.
Yeah, and I think you alluded to it a bit in your question, but there's so many different facets of NFTs, and it's tough to have a one-size-fits-all product for everything because your art collector is vastly different from your PFP speculator. So naturally, there's going to be kind of differing user experiences, and hopefully, by partnering with Shape, we'll continue to have a better experience for both the artists and the collectors moving forward.
Yeah, and I think that what is unique about Shape, or what I noticed about Shape from the moment that you first, launched, was this emphasis on creative culture. And I'd love to understand kind of in the original genesis of bringing Shape to life, how were you baking that in from day one?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we started looking at the landscape of L2s, we kind of found it a little bit of a dystopia. And I think a lot of the people in this room probably agree that a lot of the L2s that have been created, it feels like often these L2s are revenue centers for corporations. And the ethos of why we got into crypto seems to have been forgotten or cast aside. And so where we started, and I'll probably explain in more detail later, where we started was, can we create neutral land in L2s? And that's ultimately the purpose of Shape, to recreate the place where, for the reasons where we created together a culture that settled on Ethereum L1, there needs to be a place in L2s where culture can settle because it is neutral land, and it becomes a place where we can all create and love. So that's a big part of how we got started on Shape. And then I guess one last thing that I'll just add is we all kind of forget that chains are like cities. So cities are places where you choose to be because you love the culture, you love the people, you love the history, you love living in the city. And it's actually the same thing. We belong to chains because we love that chain's culture. And so what we are endeavoring to do is recreate a lot of the things that happened on ETH-L1 and then allow it to scale and have it to be a place where you want to be there because you love the city, you love the chain.
Yeah, you know what? I really resonate with what you said there. Just the idea of its neutral land, and from there, if you build a fertile land, what evolves from that can kind of be its own and create its own culture from that. Just like, personal anecdote, while we were here, it was just funny. We went out to dinner, and there was literally a Bitcoin table that sat over here and an Ethereum table that sat over there. And I can guarantee you the conversations were quite different that happened at those.
It's like the old dances in middle school, like in sixth grade, where there's like the guys in one corner and the girls in
the boys and the girls, we sat at different tables. I mean, it's interesting because I think, in some way when you were building this neutral land, there was some element of thinking about these cities, and what nobody wants is a crowded city, right? And that's kind of something I think that OpenSea is navigating right now, which is like, how are you ensuring that creators and kind of have this opportunity to maintain an identity that feels individual and stands out in a very crowded, noisy environment?
Yeah, I think it's tough because, like I said earlier, there are so many different people with different intentions on OpenSea, and everyone looks at things differently. But at the end of the day, it is a marketplace where you transact, but because you have such a massive amount of people transacting, you have such an opportunity to get a message across and provide this context that's so sorely lacking right now in this space, I think. And so you've already kind of just started to see us leaning more into curation on homepages, and there's still lots of work to be done. I'll be the first to admit that, and it's what I'm so excited about with the opportunity of being here. But also, more editorial content. We have a massive audience and a lot of subscribers. We need to do better leveraging that, and so that way when someone goes to OpenSea, they know what they're looking at and what they're looking for. Because a lot of times you can easily get lost, for lack of a better word, in the sea. Yeah. And so it's our job to also help people navigate that journey, and that starts with providing context and content that helps make that better.
Yeah, I think context is king, and it was so interesting. In the panel that was just before us, the museum panel, they were talking about the same thing. It seems like right now in our space, there's this genesis around this, I don't know, energy around the idea of needing more context, needing more editorial contact, needing that to kind of help us understand this movement and understand the art better. And I think that's really interesting. Why don't we shift gears a little bit and talk a little bit about ownership and meaning? So I guess maybe I'd love to think, so we've talked a lot about the creator in some way, right? But I also think there's a very unique character and quality to the creator-collector relationship in this specific contemporary art movement that is happening right now. So this is a question for you, Han, and for Shape. How are you encoding and enabling more meaningful creator and collector relationships on your L2?
Yeah, so we're doing a lot of things there, and it starts with creating a tribe. So far, the people who have been actively collecting and creating on Shape, they think of Shape as their chain, and once you have that, they become very active. They become very curious about their collectors, their artists, and it becomes like it becomes a very a fertile place where creativity can happen. We recently did a drop with OpenSea, and we actually the initial allow list was just for shape collectors, and it just sold out in 3 minutes. And so that's the kind of energy that a lot of the shape community brings to a lot of the creations that are that are happening. And then we also added the system called a stack. So the stack is kind of like your online reputation on Shape. And why is that important? Well, we live in crypto where Sybil attacks are the bread and butter of how crypto works, right? And what we did with the stack is we ensured that Sybil attacks are actually starting to get very expensive. You can't really attack it unless you start spending lots of money. And there we are creating a culture of collecting, because often, when you collect something on Shape, you get a medal, but that medal is taken away from you if you, for example, sell it, or give it to somebody else, or whatever happens. And so that means that it has this culture of collecting, and we think that over the months over the next couple of months, we're going to create an ingrained culture of collecting, and it'll be a return to a lot of the things that we enjoyed. So none of the pump and dumps, none of the Sybil attack botted things that have been created in crypto. It's more like real people who are collecting for fun, and they genuinely love it.
Yeah, and I think about this a lot when I think about the way that I collect. And I'm not a whale or a massive collector. I'm very methodical about what I collect. But if I collect something, I'm probably holding it forever. I almost imagine it, and my wallet is like my home, and every single piece could live on a wall in that way. And so I'm really excited to hear that, because it's kind of rewarding a behavior that I think is more intimate, and brings more meaning and more long-term generational thinking that isn't so short-sighted in terms of how we reward human behavior or collector behavior. I think it's interesting, because I could imagine that no platform has more data on collector behavior than OpenSea. And so I'd be kind of curious, like, what's going on with the collector identity that you're seeing right now, or how it's evolving?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of touched on it like a little earlier, where we do have like the full spectrum of people participating in NFTs on our platform, and it's kind of a tricky situation, because you want the community to like make their own decisions and drive their own behaviors, but at the same time there does need to be an element of curation. So it's a very difficult balancing act when you're in charge of deciding what's going to be on the homepage of OpenSea today. Like, that carries a lot of weight and a lot of power, and it influences kind of the direction of what people are looking at. And it's also like tough to be an artist who may not be featured on that homepage and feel like you don't have a voice. So we're still looking for ways to continue to give those artists a voice and make everyone feel like they have a voice. And the other side of that is like giving the collector, the knowledge they need to know what they're looking at when they go to OpenSea. I don't think Vinny's kids are in the room here, so we're good.
I think they saw enough last night.
No toddlers out there.
They've been ejected. Yeah. But I mean,
they carting people at the door here.
It's such a tricky question, because I feel like this is just the nuance and paradox of this space, this contemporary art movement. There's no clear yes, no, this is right, this is wrong. And so kind of I'd love to dig a little bit more while we're here into curation. Like, how are you kind of balancing openness with inclusivity, with like, okay, let's like, curate and yeah, I mean.
I think a lot of it is just like, being in touch with the community and like listening to people, and like having OpenSea be like a place where people can approach and be listened to, as opposed to just this kind of black box where no one knows what's going on there. So I think moving forward, and you've already seen it, like we're going to be a lot more forward facing and a lot more like hearing the needs of the community and responding to those as quickly as we can, because I think that's, like you said, you kind of touched on it, everything evolves so quickly. Like, the space today is so different from even like 3 months ago, and I can guarantee you 3 months from now, it's going to be very different than it is today. So it's always tough to be adapting that quickly. But at the same time, I think the way you solve that is just by being more in touch with everyone and connected.
You know, I think it's interesting because, you know, just on like a personal level, this idea of always responding to the community, being in service to the community, but also having your North Star. I mean, just when I was, you know, leading the CryptoPunks project, you know, it's something that I'm sure Yuga generally struggles with. It's like every single major company in this space is probably struggling with. It's like listening, but also, you know, I sometimes think of this idea, it's like you want to give people something that they don't even know that they want yet. And so it's like, how do you stay ahead of that because you're only responding to the demands? And I don't have an answer. I'm just saying it is a tricky balance that I know that I was personally always trying to navigate. And sometimes it's literally just as much as giving someone room to be heard and making sure that you don't feel like a black box. I mean, I don't know, Han, if you have any thoughts, like how are you navigating, I'm going off script here a little bit, but you know, like in the dialogue with your community of collectors?
Yeah, we listen quite a bit to the community. We think that so in many ways, if you think about a chain, it really is when we think about a community, we always think of a collective of people. And a chain is actually a manifestation of, like a mathematical manifestation of a tribe of people. It's a tribe of people who believe in the principles often of the chain and want to participate in the chain. And so for a chain, the community is everything. Like that is the source of all authority and a source of all correctness. And so when we interact with the community, our tribe, we like to call it, we take all feedback like very seriously, as in like, okay, something comes up, even something minor, we'll take a look at it and like make extremely fast decisions. Often a lot of the things that we do, we hear something, we'll see it on Twitter, we'll see it on Discord, and sometimes it'll just be like a passing comment, as in like it's not even directed at us. But one of us will like screenshot and say, hey, we should take a look at this. And it's like within like 10 minutes, we've had a conversation, we've made a decision, and we're already executing on it.
Wow.
And so I think that's the only way that a chain can operate.
Wow.
And so like we think it's the source of everything.
Yeah, and I think it also helps make your product so much better because you only have so many people working internally, but those external voices have such a big impact on how you make changes and how you adjust. And without that, like I think it would be a lot tougher to innovate, and you'd find stuff that you wouldn't even think about before. So that's huge too.
I think that's why OpenSea kind of has this like momentum right now, is that you definitely have your finger on the pulse. And I know your team, Han, and one of your team members, Prav, probably sends me more messages than anyone else, and is tracking on every single thing happening in the space. The amount of computational skills on that one is very high. Well, I just have maybe. It's interesting because something that I think that I have heard in terms of like, the debate of L1 versus L2, et cetera, is like, this idea of permanence on chain. And, obviously L2s are about speed and performance. How do you ensure that meaning and permanence exists on your chain? Like, how are you thinking about that?
I love this question. I think it's at the heart of like all the questions that people have about L2s. So fundamentally, the question is like, will the L2 ever decentralize, right? How can we trust the stuff that is minted and created on an L2? And I actually have a lot of similar questions, and I'll tell you why. So as I had mentioned before, when we did a landscape study of all the L2s that are out there, we also had a lot of worries about whether these L2s actually intend to decentralize. And so here's the kind of like very upfront kind of like explanation of what's happening. Number one, the technology is not yet there. So a high throughput node that currently like persists rollups to ETH-L1, it requires some additional tech to be fully decentralized. So for example, for the Optimism network, there is something called a sequencer. And that sequencer has to become a distributed system, as in multiple machines, multiple participants, and then add to it the idea of like crypto incentivization, so that people who run sequencers will be able to benefit from it. But even before that, there's the validator network, which will be turned on for Shape at some point. And so that will happen first as well. But really, I just went into, I think, the rabbit hole, kind of zooming back a little bit.
I was like, I'm totally following. Validator.
I'm too smooth brain for this.
I was like,
Yeah, the engineer side of my brain just turned on, and when that happens, there's no stopping it. I'm like, okay, stop talking about this. All right, but kind of zooming out. The important thing is, I'm a big believer in incentives, not the crypto kind of incentive, but like human behavior incentives. Charles Munger, I think it's Munger. He has a famous saying, right? It's like, tell me the incentives and I will tell you the outcome. And right now, for almost every single L2 out there, how L2s behave is that they are revenue centers for corporations. It means that, if it's an Optimism network, for the sequencer fees that are being generated, it actually all goes to the corporation that houses the L2. And then what happens is, well, the L2 organization hires lots of people. The people are paid via basically, these fees that are generated from the L2. And so for that, you're like, well, that's never, it's going to be very hard to decentralize that thing. And so what we did with Shape is we started with the fees that are being generated from the network, they actually go back to the community. So, and we started from the start of doing that. And so we ourselves are the most incentivized among all the L2 teams out there to decentralize this network as quickly as possible. And then second, and I think also none of the L2s have ever done this as well. We've reserved about 30 percentage points of the Shape token to incentivize future full decentralization. So it means that we already have like a huge percentage of the pie that's dedicated to making sure that initially in the early days of Shape, people are going to be incentivized to run their own validators, run their own sequencers. And these are like early 2 proof points, and there's actually a lot more that we have in-house that are being developed, and we just can't talk about it right now. But we are truly the L2 that actually has real proof points of like, we are going to decentralize this thing as quickly as possible.
Wow, that's really interesting. And I think what's interesting about what you said, or at least what I resonated with through the engineer speak, was this idea of like human behavior, rewarding human behavior. And I think we, in this moment in time, find ourselves not just in this space, like what it means to be human is really evolving, how we're thinking about meaning, how we're thinking about meaning making. And on-chain culture is just not only on-chain culture, but on the way that we are making as meaning as human is changing at this like crazy pace and scale. I don't know. I mean, what do you think about this as you think about it in respect to OpenSea? A really philosophical question. What do you think about how we're making meaning as humans?
I mean, it's a tough question, and I don't want to go too deep down the rabbit hole of like philosophical beliefs and stuff, but I mean, I think the thing that's so crazy about all of this is like nothing ever stops. Like we are just, it's on 24/7. It's not like our traditional market where it opens at 8 a.m. and it closes at 4. Like here it is 24/7. Like something crazy is going to happen probably in 3 or 4 days from now, where like the entire culture just shifts. It's almost like these tectonic plates just moving around, like in the early prehistoric days. And I think, like I was saying earlier, it's very hard to balance reacting with also like getting ahead of stuff and being forward thinking. And so that's something that we're always going to struggle with. Everyone in this space is probably going to struggle with. Like, but at the same time, it breeds so much innovation, and that's like we're just innovating at such an insane pace that it's really, really cool to see like how people just you think people are going to stop like coming up with cool ideas, and they always keep coming up with cool ideas. So it's really cool to be a part of and just have like from an observation standpoint as well.
Yes, it is. We're truly in the midst of a renaissance, and I guess maybe for you, Han, like how do you see L2s helping us get there? You know, I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a big part of it. So if you think of NFTs, they settled on ETH-L1, and one of the things as a result of that we forgot is that NFTs are a lot more than static objects. So because ETH-L1 is so expensive to do any computation on, any storage on, it turned out that we thought NFTs are things you just buy, hold, and sell. And so most of the culture that was generated on ETH-L1 were based on kind of like these like things that you hold. And I'm not demeaning them at all. Like I love these assets and I love these things. But NFTs are so much more than that. NFTs are computational objects. They're fully programmable. And on an L2, you can actually do computation without it costing like an arm and a leg. And you can store things without costing an arm and a leg. And so L2s, whenever you give an artist, whenever you give creators these powers, they're going to use it. And they're going to create amazing things. And so L2s are the place where I think the next stage of creativity will happen. And then you want to ensure that an NFT occurs at a place that is actual neutral land, that is actually decentralized. And so I think we're going to see remarkable things happening on Shape because of all those factors.
Yeah, and like just to tack onto that point, I feel like artists often have these really cool, crazy ideas, but they're oftentimes constrained by what they can do on an L1. So to hear that, there's an opportunity for artists to push the boundary and like push innovation forward by like having more options at their disposal in ways that they can make the medium additive to the art. Like I say that all the time where it's one thing to just upload something onto the blockchain and call it digital art, but it's a whole nother thing to have the art actually, or the blockchain itself be a part of the art, and that's like where it really, really gets interesting for me.
Yeah, and I'm actually really glad you said that because, it's actually picking up on some of the threads of conversations that I've been having with artists or collectors. It's like, in silico has been the name of a movement that we've kind of talked about, and then talking with Matt and John or William Apon or Florian, they're calling themselves protocol artists. Conversations I'm having with Matt Dryhurst and Holly Herndon, protocol art. And I think like this idea of the chain itself being another tool in the toolbox, another color, another brush. I mean, the potential is really limitless there. And again, I think it's going to take more of a engineer / artist / hacker / painter mind to figure out where that can go. But I think it's kind of in parallel to what we're seeing with AI as well. And so, I guess maybe because I'm kind of this, I don't know what the right word is, AI file, huge fan. How are you kind of, how is OpenSea kind of seeing AI evolve authorship and identity? Like, what are you seeing on the platform? And is there anything that's kind of both exciting you or alarming you there?
Yeah, I mean, I think this could be its own panel by itself, honestly, like talking about AI and its implications on what we do and more broadly what everyone's doing. But for me, there's a couple things that stand out, especially as they pertain to OpenSea. And there's definitely one of the things that gets me most excited is how it could maybe help with discoverability on the platform and maybe prompt-based searching. Whereas as opposed to like right now, you're very limited with what you can do in the search bar. But down the road, it's not unreasonable to think in the very near future we could build something where it could actually help you through your art discovery and guiding experience. You could say, hey, I'm looking for, a moving, not static piece that is in the style of, I don't know, like Mark Rothko's aesthetic or something like that. And then boom, you get all these different artists that kind of fit within that kind of criteria you're looking for. And so by AI could really supercharge like the discoverability experience. That's the first thing that comes to mind. I mean, I could go on with like a million other crazy
I could
ideas,
do a whole another panel on AI.
I think we wouldn't beat the sunset if that was the case.
Well, Han, is there anything that that you want to say in terms of AI or shape, or before we, creativity in general? Otherwise, I think we might let these fine folks go on with their evening or day.
Yeah, just one last thing, which is I think everybody underestimates the impact of NFTs on AI. Almost nobody understands that basically the fundamental unit of exchange for there will be like a universe of NFTs upon which agents will be operating, and then it's going to be a crazy world. And this is way beyond the scope of this talk, but yeah, basically it'll be like units of information that are traded between agents and state updates between, and NFTs are going to be, we think of most of crypto as like fungibles. And most people don't realize actually the biggest component of crypto is actually going to be NFTs by far. And so it's going to be a huge component of AI and NFTs. And for Shape, we're very much into it. There's a lot of things coming up in that direction. So really excited for it.
Wow, so much to stay tuned for. And if you want to hear more about AI or philosophy around humanity, you can probably find us somewhere having a drink
Somewhere
later
at a
on.
bar, yeah.
Yeah. Find us there, and we'll continue to
Go
ramble.
way deeper after 3 glasses of wine, yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, and thanks everybody for listening to our chat.
Love you guys.